Welcome to Whiskey Cast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1083 for November 17th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
To me, it seems like it's gone by pretty fast. So it seems like 3 or 4 years to me, even though we just had our 5th anniversary a few years ago. So it's for me, it feels like we should not be 10 years old yet. I know from the outside looking in, it looks like it should be a long, long time.
Ironroot Republic Distilling celebrated its 10th anniversary this weekend with a party. The Licorice family opened their distillery in Denison, Texas in 2014 and made a few mistakes along the way, along with some successes, including winning the World's Best Bourbon Award at the World Whiskies Awards in 2020. I'll talk with head distiller and blender Jonathan Licorice later on Whiskey Cast in depth, and taste a couple of his whiskeys in the What I'm Tasting This Week department. We'll also have Behind the Label and a whole lot more as we celebrate the 19th anniversary of Whiskey Cast and begin our 20th year as whiskey's longest-running podcast series. The news is next on this week's Whiskey Cast.
The second release in Dewar's 4-part collector series, Dewar's Double Double 38-Year-Old, is now available. It's a tribute to the Scottish Highlands, and it's like nothing you've had before. More in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Diageo has opened a new $120 million distillery in China's Yunnan province. The Yuntuo distillery will make single malt whiskey and will be able to use Yunnan oak for some of its cask needs. Diageo CEO Deborah Crew says the new distillery reflects the company's confidence in the future of Chinese whiskey. Meanwhile, India's Piccadilly Agro Industries has announced plans to build a new distillery in Scotland. The makers of Indri single malt whiskey have secured approval from HM Revenue and Customs to build a distillery on 58 acres of land in Portavadie on Scotland's western coast. However, the site must still receive local planning approval before construction can begin. It's been 2 years since Denny Potter and Jane Bowie left Maker's Mark to build their own Potter Jane distillery. Now Maker's Mark has finally named a new master distiller to succeed Denny Potter. Dr. Blake Layfield was previously Maker's Mark's Senior Director of Innovation, Blending, and Quality. Beth Buckner has succeeded Jane Bowie as lead blender. New whiskeys of note this week, and there are a lot of them. Four Roses has unveiled the Single Barrel Collection, featuring 3 additional Four Roses recipes, alongside the traditional OBSV recipe. The annual release debuts early next year, and each year 3 of the 10 Four Roses recipes will be bottled as single barrels. The recommended retail price, $49.99 a bottle. Gordon and MacPhail has released this year's Recollection series of whiskeys from closed or long-time silent distilleries. The series includes a 1991 Rosebank, a 1981 Port Ellen, a 1979 Glenlochy, a 1984 Convalmore, a 1990 Imperial, and a 1981 Northport. Prices range from £1,650 for the Imperial to £10,000 a bottle for the Port Ellen. Irish Distillers has released the second edition of Middleton Very Rare Forêt de Tronquay whiskey. The blend was finished for 4 years in casks made from oak from the forest of Tronquay in France. The whiskey carries a recommended retail price of €5,000 a bottle. Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company is kicking off a new Phoenix Legends series with a 24-year-old single malt that celebrates the 100th anniversary of Notre Dame's first national championship in college football. The whiskey is finished in Reeve Salt wine casks and is priced at $500 a bottle. I received a sample this week, and I'll have my tasting notes for it soon at the WhiskeyCast website. Teeling is also releasing its oldest whiskey yet, a 40-year-old Irish single malt distilled in 1983. It's priced at $16,000 a bottle. Rosebank has released a travel retail exclusive for UK airports only. It's a 33-year-old single cask bottling, of which just 107 bottles are available. No word on pricing, but expect it to be expensive. The Dalmore is out with its vintage collection releases for 2024, the Dalmore Vintage 2009 and the Vintage 2006. Each November, the Dalmore's whiskey makers nose and select 15 and 18-year-old casks for the following year's vintage collection releases. The 2009 is priced at 173 pounds a bottle, while the 2006 is priced at 403 pounds. Compass Box has unveiled its latest limited edition release. Secrets of Smoke showcases sweetness combined with peat. The blend includes Kalila finished in Palo Cortado sherry-seasoned butts, Lafroig finished in Marsala barriques, and Compass Box's own Peat Monster blend finished in red wine casks. It's available for $165 a bottle. I'll have my tasting notes for it soon at whiskeycast.com. Angel's Envy has released its annual cask-strength bourbon, finished in a combination of ruby port and tawny port barrels. It's bottled at 59.4% ABV and is the 13th edition in the cask-strength series. There's no word on pricing. Foley Family Wine and Spirits has launched the Minden Mill Single Estate Whiskies, distilled at its Minden Mill Distillery in Nevada. All of the grain for the whiskeys comes from within 5 miles of the distillery on land controlled by Minden Mill. There are 4-year-old bourbon and rye whiskeys and a 5-year-old American single malt. Prices will range from $44.99 for the bourbon and rye to $59.99 for the American single malt. MGP is out with its annual release of Remus Gatsby Reserve. The 15-year-old bourbon is a blend of medium and high rye bourbon mash bills. There's no word on pricing. The Glenrothes is hinting at a new 15-year-old expression that will become part of its core portfolio. It's matured exclusively in sherry-seasoned casks and is bottled at 43% ABV. There's no word on pricing. And Tom Navulin has unveiled its new port cask edition just in time for the holidays. It's finished in tawny port casks from Portugal and priced at just £35 a bottle in the UK. And finally, last week during our interview with peatland scientist and author Mike Billett, he mentioned the work Suntory Global Spirits has done in restoring damaged peatlands in Scotland. Now comes word that the company's Peatland Water Sanctuary program has received the Nature Rich Scotland Award in this year's Vibes Scottish Environment Business Awards. The program's goal is that by 2040, it'll be restoring enough peatlands annually to equal twice what Suntory uses each year to make its peated whiskies. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskeycast.com and in the WhiskeyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskeyCast.
It's a busy week, so let's open up the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. I'll be heading to Fredericton, New Brunswick for this year's New Brunswick Spirits Festival, which kicks off on Tuesday and runs through this Saturday. Listen for special coverage from Fredericton next time around. Whiskey Fest New York is on Wednesday night, along with a tasting of Filey Bay whiskeys at the Whiskey Exchange's Great Portland Street shop in London. Whiskey Washback DC takes place on Friday night in Washington, along with Whiskeys of the World in Chicago. Whiskey Live Singapore is this coming weekend, along with the English Whiskey Festival on Saturday in Birmingham, England. Finally, the Banff Whiskey Experience is on November 29th and 30th in Banff, Alberta. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to our calendars at whiskeycast.com and in the WhiskeyCast community app.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old is the second release in a 4-part limited edition collector series honoring Scotland's most legendary whiskey regions. This rare blended malt, a tribute to the Upper Scottish Highlands, is crafted from nearly 4-decade-old Highland and Islay whiskies. It undergoes Dewar's unique 4-stage aging process with a final finish in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks from the prestigious Royal Brackless single malt. The finish invites you to explore your own tasting notes, but for me, there's incredible depth, with rich layers of vanilla, toasted cereals, dried figs, plums, dark chocolate, and a subtle hint of Islay smoke, all beautifully balanced. To truly elevate this tasting experience, renowned chef Gabriel Cruther, in collaboration with Dewar's, has created an exclusive selection of custom chocolates. Crafted from the world's finest ingredients, each piece is infused with a few precious drops of Dewar's Double 38-year-old whiskey, making this a luxurious and unforgettable pairing. Now available, this exquisite pairing of whiskey and chocolate promises to deliver an unforgettable experience. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 48.8% alcohol by volume.
Whiskey Cast in Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. In 2014, Jonathan and Robert Licorice, along with their parents Marcia and John, opened Ironroot Republic Distilling in Denison, Texas. This weekend, they celebrated their 10th anniversary with a party at the distillery. I spent some time during the weekend with Jonathan Licorice, the head distiller and blender, for this week's Whiskey Cast in Depth. It doesn't seem like 10 years since you guys opened up the distillery. It seems a lot longer.
Well, to me, it seems like it's gone by pretty fast. So it seems like 3 or 4 years to me, even though we just had our 5th anniversary a few years ago. So it's for me, it feels like we should not be 10 years old yet. I know from the outside looking in, it looks like it should be a long, long time.
From the outside looking in, it looks like a long, long time because you guys really sort of punched over your weight from early on. I'm thinking the Texas Legation Bourbon for Berry Brothers and Rudd, just a couple of years into your distilling career.
Yeah, we were really young when that came out. So I think the first samples I sent off were maybe 14 months old to Doug over there. And so it's been, now we're a lot older now. So we've got, typically our ages are going 36 to 48 months on the young stuff. And some of the stuff like we're going to try up here this weekend for the 10th anniversary, we've got some 10-year-old mixed in, so.
Give me the origin story of the distillery for those who have not heard it in the past.
Okay. Well, from conception, it started when we wandered into dry fly distilling up in Spokane, Washington. And we had no idea you could actually start a distillery at that point in time. We just were on a family reunion, wandered in there, fell in love with the copper. My family's been in the copper industry for a while. We like to say that there's copper in our blood. And we knew at that moment we had to have a still. But they told us we were going to have to get a license. And so this is kind of the fruition of that. And that was a long time coming.
And you worked with Humbert St. Germain and Nancy Fraley early on.
We did. So we had learned a lot about distillation, but we didn't realize how much we didn't know about the maturation side until we started talking with Nancy and Hubert and realized that we had a lot of catching up to do early on in our career.
How so?
We had always thought it was like you see in Kentucky typically. They put things in the barrel, and then in 4 years you can kind of get it out. And we didn't realize that there was a whole other world on the brandy side where there's more of a coaxing and élevage process in which you get to raise the barrels as if they're your children.
Explain the élevage process because it really sets you apart from other distillers.
So élevage is it's a long process, and it's more of a philosophy than anything else. So there's a lot of things in the French winemaking world. There's a lot of things in the brandy making world in which they basically will try and raise a spirit and as if it's a child, and that's what it translates to literally. And so we do a lot of different things. So as soon as the spirits turn 18 to 24 months, we're tasting through them. We're getting to know those spirits. We're taking detailed notes on them. And each barrel is going to get guided in its own path when we do that. And so we can do things with slow water reduction to the barrels over time. If I know it's going to go in a special blend, we'll start doing that. We can move them around the warehouse to encourage different flavors. We can adjust the proof in order to have different flavors come out of the wood. So some things are more water soluble, some things are more alcohol soluble, and so we're able to get a lot of different flavors by just switching the proof in cask if we want to. I make certain blends that are concentrates or things that we typically will over oak on purpose that we can use as blending components. There's a lot of techniques that the French have that we're a little bit limited on the bourbon side, but so we kind of do things that are similar that we can apply those techniques to it.
And you won the award for World's Best Bourbon in 2020 at the World's Whiskey Awards. What did that mean for you guys after about 6 years
That changed the course of the distillery at that point. So if you remember correctly, that was basically at the height of COVID coming in. A lot of the craft distilleries were struggling at that point in time. We were actually doing fairly well with a little bit of recognition for the bourbon. And we still haven't caught up to the demand for Harbinger yet. We're still behind. I'm hoping with the addition of some newer warehousing that we'll eventually get there.
You're getting ready to pull the plug on flip the switch rather, on a brand new expansion and then build a second warehouse. What's that mean for you guys in terms of being able to expand your capacity?
Oh, that's a dream come true to be able to expand it out. We've been kind of living within our footprint for the past 10 years. When we first put a few barrels in the back, it seemed like we were never going to fill that room. And then now it seems like we can't jam enough barrels in there to actually support what we need right now.
Tell me about Harbinger.
Harbinger's kind of my baby. So that was the very first bourbon that we released here. And it was a profile that we just were at the blending table. We put it together, and it just struck me as something that I really liked. It was my type of bourbon. It had all these brunch flavors that I really like, with the pancakes and the syrup and fresh fruit notes and coffee notes. And it kind of seemed like, I call it brunch a lot of times, but it was just a profile that really hit home to me, and I was really excited that we were going to be able to continue making it. And it was intended with the name Harbinger. I named it that because it was supposed to be a foreshadowing of the things to come, and I think it accomplished that.
What mistakes did you make over the past 10 years that you'd like to go back and fix?
Rob and I often joke that we could probably write a book about how not to start a distillery. We have everything from just when we were purchasing the building, we had some issues with the real estate side of it. Our license got stuck when the government had shut down 10 years ago. Our license was stuck in the government. We had a mash tank get crushed twice during installation. We've had...
Explain that, what happened with that mash tank getting crushed, because it wasn't a case of it falling off the truck, was it?
No, that was the people who were installing it kept putting a plug in where there was supposed to be a vent, and so it was just naturally crushing under the pressure of the water in the piping. And so it still is, our current mash tank is still octagonally shaped inside because of that. We've just been kind of using it until we get a new one, which is hopefully happening really soon.
And go on with the other things you learned from.
Other things we've learned. It's very hard to oversize a chiller. We seem to always be trying to upgrade the chilling, especially in Texas. I think I finally have it figured out, but we had to get 10,000 gallons of cold water reservoir to pull it off. That's the most of what we've learned. So, I mean, we could probably go on for hours.
What makes Texas whiskey unique?
I think the thing that sets Texas whiskey apart is we don't have one specialty here. So there's a lot of people who are doing bourbon. There's people who are doing single malt. There's all different types of whiskey being made, but there is a certain flavor that does seem to bridge the gap between all of them, and it definitely has to be on the maturation side. So Texas, the way it ages whiskey, is going to be unique to Texas, and I think that's very interesting that it has kind of its own thumbprint on it. Even if some guys are trying to blend it out and they don't really want as much of the Texas flavor, but Texas will apply itself there.
How do you balance the unique terroir that you have here in Denison with your whiskeys?
So a long time ago, when we learned the French techniques used in the brandy making world from Hubert and Nancy, what we found was that we could actually use those techniques to different ends than the French do, and we can actually use it to help tame the Texas climate. And that's something we've been working over for the past 10 years. Some of that includes increasing the barrel size. So we use 65-gallon barrels instead of typical 53s. That helps put the surface area to volume ratio in our favor. So we're not losing as much to the Angels. We can kind of control the maturation process. We can keep things in barrel a little bit longer doing that. And a lot of those techniques are geared towards making Texas whiskey the best it possibly can be.
How does your whiskey compare to, say, other Texas distillers? Everyone is unique in a way, right?
Yeah, in Texas, there's a lot of different types of whiskey being made, but we have a lot of people who learn different disciplines. So you got Dan Garrison down in High, who learned from Kentucky distillers. You've got the guys at Balcones who learned from single malt producers. You got us who are kind of a little bit different, who learn from French producers. And so everybody's doing it a little bit differently. With ours, what I really like about our whiskey is it is dense. There are other people in Texas whiskey who have density of flavor like we do, but we've got a lot of mouthfeel. And so we're able to go to a lot higher proofs and it not taste quite as harsh as it should. And we really like to experiment quite a bit with heirloom grains. And so we kind of view a lot of the heirloom grains that we're using more like we're using seasonings, and we're applying those to a Texas steak. And so we'll get some of the different heirlooms. So if it's purple corn, I know what flavors that's going to apply to it. If we add in bloody butcher corn, we're doing that. We're using them as flavoring grains, which is helping us out to stand out a little bit differently from the rest of the Texas whiskey.
And you're pulling these grains from within 60 miles of the distillery for the most part, right?
About 95% of the grains we use are within 60 miles of the distillery. So there's a few we have to go out and get a little bit further that are more high elevation, cool weather corns that don't grow as well down here. But for the most part, we try and keep it local.
You've also been playing around with distilling single malt, too.
We have. So we haven't released any single malt yet, but we've been laying down a couple batches of single malt that has more to do with our love of single malt than anything else. You'll probably see some special releases from Ironroot coming out. We've got some where we use some malted barley from Butte, Montana, which is where my parents are from originally, and that was kind of a special batch to us. And so it's something that we make some of these different types of whiskey because we love whiskey in general.
Tell me about the 10th anniversary bourbon.
So we've got a couple of things coming up for the 10th anniversary. The one that we call for our anniversary is typically I-Core. And so I-Core this year it's a big one. It's 140 proof, or actually a little bit over 140 proof. It's dark. It's meant to be a cigar blend. It's meant to pair with cigars. And it's something I've been curating for quite a long time. Carefully selecting flavors from each barrel. And so when I say it's a cigar blend, it has no finishes on it. It is 100% bourbon when we're doing that. And then I also have my kids' barrels coming out, which we call the Team Danger blend. For my kids named Danica and Granger, you put their name together, it becomes Danger. And so we did that by accident. But those barrels were special because Danica's barrel was barrel number 1. That was the very first thing we distilled here. And then, of course, that one's the 10-year-old that's going to be in that blend. And then I mixed it with my son's barrel, which is just a little bit younger. But that's something very special to us as well.
You guys have done a lot with hazmat whiskeys over the years. Become known for them, in fact. Why?
I think part of the reason we really like the hazmat flavors here is it's not hard for us to get a hazmat in Texas. So the first ones we did were actually by accident. So we just left them in the barrel room too long, and they got a little bit higher than we were anticipating them being. But what we noticed was with our whiskey, because it comes off a pot still, because it's on grain, because we have a downward-facing line arm, that we actually get a lot of that oily texture to come over in our spirit, and it actually helps us drink a lot higher proof without it feeling like it's that high a proof.
Give me a sense of what Ironroot Republic looks like at 20 years.
So 10 years from now, let's see. So in 20 years, I hope we have that other warehouse built before then. I hope we're expanding out further than that. I hope we have to where we can have Harbinger on the shelf at that point in time. I hope that my kids are coming to work with us at that point in time. So in another 10 years, my daughter will be 23, so she can actually come up here and she could help blend. She wants to take over the business eventually, so I tell her, more power to you. Come help us out. So I hope that's where we're at by then.
Thanks to Jonathan Licorice for spending a few minutes this week on WhiskeyCast In Depth. And full disclosure, I was Ironroot Republic's guest at the distillery this weekend. But as always, full editorial control over this episode remains with WhiskeyCast. That's WhiskeyCast In Depth, brought to you by Oban, a deliciously smooth single malt known for its coastal charm and Highland heritage, loved by whiskey lovers worldwide. Discover Oban's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with Ironroot Republic's Team Danger bourbon that we heard about during the interview with Jonathan. It's bottled at 63.75% ABV, and the nose has touches of caramel, molasses, and dark chocolate. The taste is dry and astringent with black pepper, a hint of citrus fruits, caramel, molasses, and a hint of spearmint. The finish is long and spicy. I'm scoring Ironroot Republic's Team Danger bourbon a 92. And as we heard from Jonathan Licorice, they only release Icor every 5 years, and this year's release is the second in the series. It's a true hazmat bourbon bottled at 70.1% ABV and comes from barrels matured in the Texas heat for 7 years. The nose has an alcohol burn along with caramel, honey, tobacco leaf, and just a hint of butterscotch. The taste does not drink like a 70% ABV bourbon, though, with notes of dark chocolate, butterscotch, tobacco leaf, caramel, and dried fruits. The finish is long and spicy with fruit jam and orange marmalade. I'm scoring the 2024 release of Ironroot Republic's Icor bourbon a 93. Had the chance to taste a corn whiskey from Georgia's Distillery of Modern Arts this week. It's bottled at 58.1% ABV, and the nose is grainy with popcorn, honey, vanilla, and a hint of tree fruits. The taste has notes of burnt corn, black pepper, honey, vanilla, and a hint of spearmint. The finish is long with a lingering pepperiness, and I'm scoring the Distillery of Modern Arts corn whiskey an 88. Finally, let's look at one of the whiskeys from Gordon & MacPhail's latest Recollection Series release, the Northport 1981 Single Malt. It's bottled at 50.7% ABV. The nose is malty with lemon zest, dried flowers, honey, and vanilla. The taste is tart and fruity with citrus, white pepper, barley sugar, and dried flowers, while the finish is long and tart. I'm scoring the Northport 1981 Single Malt from Gordon & MacPhail a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of more than 3,800 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at whiskeycast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey. This past Tuesday, we celebrated the 19th anniversary of the very first WhiskeyCast episode on November 12, 2005. Making us Whiskey's longest-running podcast series as we start our 20th year. Thanks to everyone who posted congratulations on the various social media platforms, like Laura Patrizio, who posted this on Facebook. I remember listening to those early episodes, always amazed at your ability to get such great interviews. I even remember all the iterations of your theme music. I can't think of making all those long drives across Pennsylvania without WhiskeyCast. You've always been a part of my whiskey travels and my good memories of working in Philadelphia. From David Levine, I've never had the opportunity to go back to the very beginning, but having been on board since around episode 700, you've been a go-to source of info and a channel I look to as inspiration, a journalistic lens on whiskey. Congrats on 19. From Jason Camerata Sr., the gold standard of whiskey podcasts, thank you for teaching me how to properly pronounce all of the whiskey distilleries. And from our good friend, the Irish whiskey guru Barry Chandler, you've done more for the global whiskey industry than any other independent journalist, broadcaster, or influencer. A must-listen podcast every week. Congratulations on 19 years. Thanks to everyone for the kind words. We're already looking at how to celebrate the 20th anniversary of WhiskeyCast next November. If you have a question, suggestion, or something else you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, share it with us in the WhiskeyCast community app. Download it today from your app store and join the conversation. We joined Blue Sky this week, and you can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskeyCast. The email address is comments@whiskeycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whiskey on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
100 individual farms of Irish barley, separately harvested, malted, fermented, distilled and matured. Is that too much effort? Perhaps. Unless you're interested in flavour above all else. Waterford Whiskey, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. The term hazmat has been thrown around a lot in recent years when it comes to whiskey. So what exactly defines a hazmat whiskey? Well, in simple terms, it's a whiskey that's so high in alcoholic content that it can catch fire easily, around 70% ABV or so. And while hazmat whiskeys are not hazardous to drink, they are hazardous because of the fire danger, so the FAA and other airline regulators ban them from being brought onto airplanes. How do whiskeys get that strong when the maximum legal barrel entry proof is 125 proof, or 62.5% ABV? Well, there are many factors, but rickhouse placement is critical. Barrels placed on a higher floor tend to gain proof strength because the angels consume more water than alcohol, while barrels on a lower floor tend to lose alcohol and water at more equal rates and will lose proof over time because the temperatures are more consistent. By the way, that part about airlines banning hazmat whiskeys from checked bags, the limit is even stricter at Isla's Gleneagledale Airport. There they search all bags with whiskey in them, which is just about every bag, and confiscate anything above 60% ABV. So if you're a fan of high-proof whiskeys and plan to visit Isla, plan on taking the ferry back to the mainland. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskeyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to November 12th, 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskeyCast, or you can use the WhiskeyCast community app. Download it today from your app store. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old blended malt has arrived, and it's a true gem for collectors. Secure a bottle, and you'll be adding a rare piece of history to your collection.
WhiskeyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.